You know, making a podcast used to be fun, but now it's just something you do if you're a former Hollywood celebrity who's been outed for being a cannibal, and you still think you're important enough that people will listen to one entire hour of your bullshit rambling. Yes, today we're talking about Armie Hammer, who just released the first episode of his new podcast, HammerTime, as he begins the long journey from being a cancelled celebrity who people thought wanted to eat people, to being a non-cancelled celebrity who, frankly, still wants to eat people.
I'm not gonna lie, I kind of like the cannibal stuff now. Like, I'm just like...
I listened to the hour-long podcast so you don't have to, and it honestly got me thinking about a lot of subjects that are far more detailed and far more complex than the numerous technical issues this podcast had. It really has almost an embarrassing amount of technical fuck-ups. As I sat there listening to an almost completely broken man in a small closet tell us about how his life was ruined by his own choices, I got to thinking about subjects like redemption, compassion, and forgiveness. Do these exist in a society, and do they exist for poor cannibal Armie Hammer? And just to be serious for a second, speaking as somebody who has been in a relationship where I was sexually and emotionally abused, this is a topic that's pretty close to my heart, and there were moments when I was making this video that were somewhat tough to deal with, so I'm going to be serious where I need to be serious throughout the context of this video. We're going to talk about some serious stuff, but at the end of the day, we are here to mock Armie Hammer's terrible podcast, and it deserves plenty of my ridicule and plenty of my jokes. Let's talk about Armie Hammer's bizarre celebrity podcast, HammerTime. My name is Patrick, but my friends call me Pat, and if you enjoy my videos, enjoy my content, like, comment on this video, it gets it out to more people, and consider subscribing. I am also on social media. I am on Twitter, I am on LinkedIn, I am on Letterboxd, is what I meant to say. I am on TikTok, and I'm on Instagram, so I've never plugged it in a video before. There you go. Heart, back. Oh, I should do the heart. Heart back by popular demand. So I think the most productive way to structure this video is going to be in the very Dickensian A Christmas Carol style. We're going to be talking about Armie Hammer's past, his career, and his numerous allegations of sexual impropriety, his present, his terrible podcast, and his future. What future do we as a society have for Armie Hammer? So naturally, first we have to start with the past. Before we get to his entire life essentially falling apart, let's talk briefly about when things were very good. Pride cometh before a fall, after all, which is a fun biblical phrase that can both be used to describe why Pride Month happens before the seasons change, and can also precisely nail down what exactly happened to Armie Hammer. Armie Hammer came from money, and like so many who do come from money, he risked it all, not really, to drop out of high school and become an actor. He would eventually get his first big career break playing both of the Winklevoss twins in The Social Network. Yes, both of them, they're twins after all. After being put on the map, he went on to star in a variety of prestigious roles like the Lone Ranger, even though I'm sure that was every kid's dream growing up. They wanted to be the Lone Ranger, even though that movie made almost no money. And more notably, he went on to star in The Guy from Richie and, you know, Call Me By Your Name. Notice I have Elio's name on my shirt, not Oliver's. And it should be noted here that Armie Hammer was, and probably still is, an immensely talented actor. That much is not really in dispute. By the time that allegations of abuse surfaced in 2021, Armie Hammer was on the top of the world career-wise. On a personal level, not so much. In June of 2020, Armie Hammer and his wife Elizabeth Chambers filed for divorce. And you know, if someone's getting a divorce in like that June, like COVID started that March, like they lasted 3 months. Like they could not handle that quarantine. They didn't even make it to like August, no, let alone to the vaccine. That relationship was probably not going to make it. And moreover, this divorce was announced via Instagram, which really causes me to wonder, like, what set of life choices does one have to make so that when they're getting divorced, they have to make a public Instagram post about it? Like, I often wonder when you see these relationship influencers, like people whose entire digital presence is based on their, like, the fact that they're in a relationship, like, what about what happens when they get divorced? Like, how soon in that breakup conversation do you think one of them is going to be bringing up the Instagram Reels account that they share? So babe, I need to talk to you. This relationship just isn't working out. I don't see a future with us. but babe. Babe, please don't say it. What about? Do not bring it up, babe. What about our collectively shared Instagram Reels account? We've got a sponsorship for Surfshark next week. It has to go live. Wait, actually, that's not them. That's me. Here's a quick word from our sponsor. I think there are cannibals out there. If there's anything scarier than running away from people trying to eat you, it's the dangers of unsecured web browsing. Seriously, is this a good time to be talking about that? It's always a good time to talk about today's sponsor, Surfshark. Do you know what a VPN is?
No, I don't know what a VPN is.
Surfshark is a VPN that helps you stay safe online. At any given point, there are a lot of hackers out there who want to steal your identity, steal your data, and gain access to your devices. When you're using Surfshark, all your data is protected by top-grade encryption. It's super easy, and it's a great way to stay safe, particularly with public Wi-Fi networks where literally anybody could be trying to steal your data.
What if I want to watch my favorite content, but it's region locked?
Surfshark can help. My personal favorite feature about Surfshark is that you can set your location to almost anywhere in the world and look at all that cool content that the Europeans keep hiding from us. Or, you know, vice versa, we hide some pretty cool stuff too. Surfshark also comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee as well as 24/7 customer service. They want you to be happy with your purchase and make sure that all of your data is safe. You know, I actually feel pretty safe right now. So if you want to protect your data, go to surfshark.com/callmepat for 4 extra months of Surfshark. Again, that's surfshark.com/callmepat for 4 extra months of Surfshark. Thanks again to Surfshark for sponsoring this video, and now back to your regularly scheduled programming. Their marriage ended based on a couple of widely reported reasons, and on some level I do really feel for these people, having their entire relationship relitigated and basically available for anybody with access to the internet to see and read about, and even being relayed by me now, but whatever. It ended because of a couple widely reported reasons. Armie Hammer was engaging in both infidelity and had a crazy substance abuse issue, but what was supposedly the straw that broke the camel's back was when he abandoned his entire family in the middle of COVID to go help a friend renovate a motel. Of all the reasons to lose your family, he has 2 kids by the way, he picks going to renovate a motel during a global pandemic. Like, at least Tom Brady got to play another season of professional football in the NFL, even if he did get bounced in the wild card. Like, this is just not a good reason to lose your family. And furthermore, your friend, I don't think he's making the best business choices. I can't imagine opening up a motel in the middle of a pandemic makes the most financial sense. It's a little bit like opening up a surf shop in Siberia. Like, is the demand really there for this business? But in mid-2021, Armie Hammer's life and career would be forever shaped by someone publishing some anonymous Instagram messages that are, well, quite disturbing. I don't come into this video to kink shame, but I am here to kink question. A lot of this controversy stems from the nature of Armie Hammer's sexual preferences, which I imagine will strike most of you as rather alarming. It also doesn't inspire a lot of confidence in Armie Hammer's innocence that when previously asked, what historical figure would you like to have dinner with, he answered the Marquis de Sade, somebody who's basically only famous for being a Frenchman with a propensity for sexual violence and is literally the namesake of the term sadism. And I'd like to mention briefly, it's very easy to answer that question with a normal answer. Who do you want to have dinner with who's been around in history? I don't know, Martin Luther King Jr., George Washington, FDR, literally anybody who's not like a French sexual deviant. It's pretty easy actually. But let's talk about the text messages, which aren't corroborated as being real, but they do confirm a lot of what we know that Armie Hammer has kind of admitted to, and to what other women have alleged that he has done over the course of their relationships. The main point of contention in the messages, Armie Hammer talks about often and explicitly fantasies surrounding cannibalism. And they're quite graphic, and I'm not going to include them in the video, but they're out there if you're curious. You shouldn't be. So take that curiosity and throw it out the window. Effie Angelova, who would ultimately be revealed as the person who put those messages out there, would go on to have a virtual press conference with Gloria Allred, who's a very high-profile lawyer in the realm of sexual assault and sexual violence. They would have that virtual press conference, and Angelova would allege that in 2017, Armie Hammer sexually assaulted her. Armie Hammer denies this and says that the encounter was consensual and that it was an example of consensual, non-consensual, a role-play scenario. This caused the Los Angeles Police Department to open an investigation into Armie Hammer, which after 2 years ended up with the district attorney declining to press charges. I'll leave the entire statement of the district attorney's office there if you want to pause and read it, but essentially they said they did not have enough evidence to prosecute this case, which, you know, they're prosecuting for a crime which is notoriously difficult to get prosecutions for because there's often not enough evidence. But 2 other women around this time also came forward detailing their personal interactions with Armie Hammer. Courtney Vucekovich, who had a relationship with Armie Hammer and said that their relationship was abusive, and Paige Lorenz, who said that in addition to sexually coercing her, Armie Hammer also took photos of her without her consent. Vucekovich seemed to confirm a lot of the cannibal rumors, claiming that Armie Hammer told her that he wanted to break one of her ribs, barbecue it, and then eat it. And Lorenz claimed that Armie Hammer sexually coerced her, causing her to engage in extreme sexual activity that she otherwise wouldn't have wanted to participate in. Armie Hammer says that all of these sexual encounters were consensual, but he doesn't deny that in his own words he was a bit of an asshole, and that the power dynamics in his relationships were quote-unquote off. But I think it's important to bring all this up not just because we're coming at it from an informed discussion so we can exactly know what Armie Hammer has been accused of. It's important to know what exactly has taken Armie Hammer from the top of the world to filming a podcast inside a closet.
Is this a closet? This is my house.
Because a lot of this entire discussion essentially hinges on what we as a society are willing to tolerate. The whole idea of cancel culture and the Me Too movement essentially hinge on this as well. What are we as a society willing to tolerate? That is the basis of celebrity. The public, the viewers, everybody chooses who they want to support with their attention, with their time, watching movies, watching television, and most people don't generally want to support others who are outwardly abusive. And I say most because Armie Hammer is certainly not without supporters. You see it in the comment section, in the online discussions, anytime he comes to the public, not just with this podcast, but a few months ago in this frankly hilarious video where he talks about his experience having to sell his car because the price of gas has gotten too expensive.
And I took it for one last road trip to CarMax. This is not an ad for CarMax.
Why do celebrities always feel the need to specify, like, hey, you know, this isn't an ad, I'm not being paid for this, as if CarMax is just salivating like, oh, you know what'll be good for our next ad campaign? We need an Instagram video of a destitute Armie Hammer complaining about gas prices and talking about how he's selling his truck to us. Actually, wait. Maybe that could be a good campaign. Thanks to 2 DUIs and some poorly chosen racial epithets, this 2021 Lexus RX formerly belonging to a C-list celebrity can be yours for a low, low price.
This is not an ad for CarMax.
And maybe I'm seeing this wrong, but is that rope in the center console there? That's not great. Let's move past that, and let's move to, instead, him complaining about high gas prices.
Since being back in LA, I have put about $400 or $500 worth of gas in it, and I can't afford it. I can't afford the gas anymore.
Yes, Armie, it does cost a lot more money to drive around a truck that is meant for, like, hauling freight than it is to drive around a much more sensible vehicle. It's always the people with cars and trucks that get 3 miles per gallon who are the most outspoken about criticizing high gas prices. Never fails to amuse me. And I know this is a very, like, 5 years ago coded complaint, but I sincerely miss the times before every single celebrity felt like they had to make a podcast and then subsequently treat the podcast like it was some sort of gift from God. Like, speaking for personal experience, making a podcast is one of the easiest things you can possibly do. It's fun, but I'm not saying it's not difficult by any stretch of the imagination. And somehow Armie Hammer and producer Jerry still managed to fuck it up on multiple different occasions. So, starting the podcast, and this is the one area where I will give Armie Hammer some credit, he has a unique opening intro sequence. I feel like a teacher trying to find something positive to say about the weirdest kid in class during the parent-teacher conference right now. Yes, little Johnny is so, creative when he draws those fun crayon stick figure drawings of your family, and, when he draws a poltergeist killing daddy. Presumably that must be you, sir. Congratulations. You have a very, unique child. I think you might have a veritable Vincent van Gogh on your hands. Deeply disturbed, but very gifted at art. I don't think there's any possible way for me to describe this intro to you, so let me just play you some of it.
Yeah, that's nice. That's nice.
So we know obviously the entire name of the podcast is just a pun on his actual name and a very famous song. But let me go all film school analysis on you and let's try to interpret this intro. I don't know why I said that because I basically can't. It is almost incomprehensible. It has clips of a psychologist, but also of psychedelic Bob Ross, and also a lot of hammers. The only thing that's even vaguely intelligible is when somebody takes a hammer to a TV, which on the TV is featuring Armie Hammer in the very famous dance scene from Call Me By Your Name. And since I'll probably never get another opportunity to bring this up on YouTube, or frankly at any other point in my entire life, during that dancing scene, Armie Hammer's penis had to be digitally edited out because it kept flopping out of his very short shorts. But on the bright side, even though we now both know that unfortunate fact, we both have it easier than whichever poor VFX guy was on erasure duty. Imagine waking up one day, maybe you've had like a terrible Hinge date the night before, and then your boss tells you at 9:15 a.m., hey, you're on floppy penis duty. Maybe best to leave that one off the LinkedIn portfolio, I imagine. Joking aside, the symbolism inherent to that suggests that Armie Hammer is turning over a new leaf. This is a new chapter in his life, for better or for worse. He's shedding off the image you may or may not have of him as he enters the most exciting chapter of his life, making a podcast. Woo! And I just wish for once these disgraced celebrities would do something that takes a little bit more creative rigor, creative talent than just the lowest form of effort there is in making a podcast. Like, I'd have infinitely more respect for Armie Hammer if instead of making a podcast, he's creating a series of bizarre and esoteric short stories that he's publishing in a obscure Los Angeles area zine. But no, instead we get HammerTime, featuring the first guest, Tom Arnold, and even though as both men talk about how they're basically A-list celebrities, I had honestly never really heard of Tom Arnold. His biggest credit, from my understanding of going on his IMDb page, was that he was a supporting character in an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, and he was on Celebrity Survivor, where he was the first boot, joining iconic first boots like Chicken.
First person voted out of Survivor China. Chicken.
And if you're wondering why his name was Chicken, it was because he was a chicken farmer. So it all happened to work out for him. Tom Arnold, though, to his credit, is by far the most interesting part of this podcast. He's so interesting, in fact, that I really don't have anything to talk about regarding him. Like, he was just on the podcast, he had a variety of interesting stories, like the story about how he got arrested for kidnapping a homeless person and checking them into rehab because he thought they were the drummer from the band Kiss. He also makes sure to plug his lawyer, which, in case you were looking for Los Angeles-based legal counsel and you also are watching the HammerTime podcast, there you go.
And I'm waiting on my lawyer, Barty Singer. If you ever need a lawyer in here, that's who you need.
Can you imagine walking into a law office and they're like, oh, great, you're going to be a perfect client. Where did you hear from us again? And you're like, well, the HammerTime podcast. I think they're going to kick you right out. I think they're going to be like, oh, gosh, this guy has probably eaten somebody. We need to get you right out. Shoo. But I enjoy these stories more so because when Tom Arnold is telling them, Armie Hammer is adding almost nothing, and it's really, you can almost tune him out. You can forget he's there. And it bears noting that the HammerTime podcast is a far cry from most celebrity podcasts, which take place in well-decorated areas, beautiful sound stages. This podcast takes place in a closet. So if nothing else, we learned where Armie Hammer's priorities are, because instead of getting a nice, well-decorated place to live, his first priority was filming a podcast. And I actually think in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, podcasts come before survival needs. So it's more important for you to film your terrible celebrity podcast than it is for you to have water to drink and air in your lungs. And I'll add here, and I really am not exaggerating here, I really try not to exaggerate for the purpose of YouTube and whatnot, but this is legitimately, this is the worst produced podcast I have ever seen. Like, I have legitimately had friends who have posted on their Instagram stories, hey, check out my podcast! And then, you know, I've really felt bad. I know they probably only have 20 listeners because that's how many listeners my podcast had. And I'll go and I'll check it out. Those podcasts had better audio quality than this one, which is shocking. If you're hoping that any of the probably at least a half dozen technical disruptions would be edited out of the final product, you keep hoping, because they're all in there. They are none of them have been edited out at all. It's like you're watching an hour-long unedited Dan Henschel video. Like, it's really bad. I'm gonna have a nice montage for you of all of the technical fuck-ups right here.
Yeah. Welcome to the podcast.
So I learned the best thing I could do is save another addict alcoholic's life, and I need to do that immediately.
Yeah.
I had 28 days. I knew everything. So I fucked everything up. But, you know, I mean, I have spent 3 years going to 12-step meetings.
Yeah, sorry. Your mic is like throaty.
I don't know. So is that in the show, what just happened?
Oh, we're keeping it all.
Good.
We're keeping
Thanks,
it all.
Jerry.
And I just want to tell Armie Hammer and producer Jerry, have some fucking self-respect, man. Tom Arnold, I can't imagine he's a particularly busy guy. You can have him do another interview if you realize it's turned out this poorly, although, that being said, I can't imagine anybody wants to hang out with Armie Hammer for an extended period of time, presumably in such close proximity to a kitchen. Was that a little Shrek there at the end? Like, Donkey! Donkey, watch out! Armie Hammer's gonna eat you! Except, well, he's only gonna eat me! Except I'm not even... Shrek is an ogre. Does that count as cannibalism? Like, do you think they taste similar? Let's move on. But come on, producer Jerry, who is the producer, the off-screen, on-screen producer, didn't you test any of this before you had your first guest? Like, at one point, one of the lights blows out, and instead of cutting, we see Jerry fix the light, and his entire ass is just in the camera. Like, we see that ass for a protracted period of time, or a protrasted period of time. Okay, sorry, we can't go one video without making a terrible pun either. But I just don't know why they wouldn't want to edit it out, because there are several very noticeable edits, especially if you're watching the video version. Like, sometimes the guest is being cut off mid-sentence. Like, it's truly, but yet you're gonna leave in him fixing the light, his giant ass on the camera. Okay. One of the topics that comes up on a more substantive level is the idea that things feel a lot more dangerous now, and the trauma that is experienced by the parent is often passed down to the kid. And I imagine that must be a rather daunting feeling when it comes to parenting, knowing that your children can Google and find any number of things that have been written or said about you, or things that you've done. I imagine that's more of a concern for Tom Arnold and Armie Hammer for obvious reasons.
Strike that. Reverse it.
Although Tom Arnold does detail on the podcast a story about how one of his kids found some nudes that a fan had sent him and then went to the bathroom and locked himself in there. A lot to unpack there, but my biggest takeaway from that is we should all know a little bit less about each other. And my other takeaway is that since I had to listen to that in that podcast, I had to tell it to you as well. And speaking of that, I think it's time we deal with the whole cannibal-shaped elephant in the room. So in this podcast, Armie Hammer laughs at the notion that a lot of people thought he was an actual cannibal, which is just obviously not true. But I don't really think people were calling him like a cannibal, although to be a cannibal, do you actually have to like engage in cannibalism, or does just the desire to be a cannibal make oneself a cannibal? If you say you're a Christian but you never go to church and you don't ever worship, like, is that the same thing? I mean, well, actually, now that I think about it, Catholics are literally eating Jesus every single Sunday, but that's only if you go to church. So if you don't go to church, are you a Christian? Are you a cannibal? These are the questions that science still hasn't answered. But for what it's worth, no one was really accusing him, to my knowledge, of being an actual cannibal. Actual cannibal Shia LaBeouf. You didn't think we were going to make it through the whole video without a reference to actual cannibal Shia LaBeouf, did you? If you did, that's crazy. But personally, I can understand why people were alarmed about even the notion of potential cannibalism. There are a lot of pretty good reasons why humanity has justifiably stigmatized the entire process for thousands of years. So much so that there are even folklore-based creatures surrounding cannibalism. The one in particular I'm thinking about is the Wendigo, a creature in Native American folklore that supposedly you become a Wendigo whenever you participate in the sacrilegious act of eating human flesh. The Wendigo was gaunt to the point of emaciation, its desiccated skin pulled tightly over its bones, with its bones pushing out against its skin, its complexion the ash gray of death, and its eyes pushed back deep into their sockets. The Wendigo looked like a gaunt skeleton recently disinterred from the grave. Hammer, naturally, denies that he is an actual cannibal and merely just insists that he has a fetish for it.
I'm not gonna lie, I kind of like the cannibal stuff now. Like, I'm just like...
I played you that clip at the top of the show, and I really wasn't lying. It raises a lot of questions, but I didn't really want to know this much about Armie Hammer's fetishes, and I'm really not sure what I should do with all this information. Wait, he isn't dead. But also in the podcast, we get into a lot more of the details about Armie Hammer's personal life and his past. He talks about how he was sexually abused when he was a child, so his introduction to sex and to sexuality was one without agency, without choice, and without power, and that this trauma has informed how he views sex now, which I think it would affect anybody, obviously just to varying degrees, but it's easy to see the trend line. And in the past year or so, he's been very vocal about how in the aftermath of everything coming out about him in 2021, he's made it a point to get sober, noting that the role substance abuse played into the poor life decisions and poor life choices he had made prior to that point. He brings up that in the modern day, there really is no concept of an apology tour, and he brings up that most of the processing he's done has not been about trying to get his acting career back, but rather making peace with the fact that it may never in fact come back. So I want to talk more about that, because I feel like unless you're being literally thrown into jail for several instances of vile sexual crimes, a lot of people can seemingly just wait out the clock on cancel culture.
Editing Pat here, or you could just fully become the president. So...
For instance, while Bill Cosby and Harvey Weinstein will probably never be rehabilitated, Louis C.K., years after some allegations of some pretty disturbing things about him came to light, years after that, in 2022, he won a Grammy and continues to sell out stadiums. And for people like Johnny Depp, winning in court also seems to have translated into winning in the court of public opinion. Frankly, in our society, there is so much inconsistency with which behavior is viewed as irredeemable and punishable and you will not have a career, and which behavior is excusable or excusable in 5 years after a lot of people have forgotten about it. And let me tell you what I mean by bringing up another example. Mark Wahlberg. It's pretty undeniable that he is an A-list actor with a lot of box office credibility. It's why he is still getting terrible PG action movies like The Family Trip or whatever it's called. I don't even care. I don't even care if I get the title wrong. That movie was terrible. I had to watch it with my mom because she loves Mark Wahlberg. And she, like many other people, are either unaware or choose to ignore what I'm about to say next. Mark Wahlberg, from the ages of 14 to 17, engaged in multiple hate crimes, from throwing rocks at a group of mostly black fourth graders and hurling racial epithets at them in turn, to also, when trying to steal beer, beating up 2 Vietnamese men and also saying a bunch of racial slurs, and so much so that one of those Vietnamese men ended up in the hospital. Sure, those crimes were a long time ago, but one of the kids that Mark Wahlberg threw rocks at still has a scar from that incident. And you could argue, despite the fact that he served time in jail for this incident, that he's being granted more levity because he was only 17 at the time. Okay, what about Liam Neeson, who's openly admitted to, for about a week, roaming around the streets with a weapon trying to find a black person to kill in an episode of racially motivated revenge? Liam Neeson is obviously still a celebrity, he's obviously still getting work, and you'd be hard-pressed to find anybody who doesn't think he's a celebrity, and frankly, you'd be even harder-pressed to find anybody who even has any broad awareness over either of these incidents. Why are Mark Wahlberg and Liam Neeson worthy of forgiveness, worthy of redemption, but Armie Hammer is not? And I don't ask that in an attempt to defend Armie Hammer, I ask that in a genuine attempt to find the answer to the question. If you scroll through the comments of Armie Hammer's Instagram or the comments of this podcast, you'll find a lot of people who are genuinely very supportive of Armie Hammer. People who presumably believe in the concept of redemption, who are moved by Armie Hammer's journey to become sober. People who see that he has expressed some contrition for his past misconduct, and people who are somewhat sympathetic to his childhood trauma. Or, and this is equally likely, people who were never that convinced by what the women had alleged about him in the first place. And if you go on Twitter and look at the accounts of people who cover pop culture, and look through the comments of those when they're talking about the podcast, you're going to see a decidedly more negative reaction to Armie Hammer's attempted comeback. But moreover, does this mean that Armie Hammer is back? As he mentions in the podcast, he's been offered a low-paying film role that will be shooting in Asia, so it's possible that in a few years we'll see a low-budget remake of The Last Samurai starring a washed-up Armie Hammer. It could be the start of a journey to get redemption, or it could be just another chapter of a celebrity who, due to his own poor life choices and decisions, will never quite make it back to the summits where he previously had conquered. On this subject, I want to talk about one of the quotes that stuck with me from one of the women who detailed abuse on behalf of Armie Hammer. From Paige Lorenz, she said that, quote, "You can be just as traumatized by consensual sex." And I think therein lies the undisputable truth. Armie Hammer hurt these women, and as someone who has been in their position, I know just how horrible that feels. To be hurt by someone that you think loves you, that you think cares about you, is about one of the worst feelings in the entire world. It's a pain that I will live with for the rest of my life, as much as I try to ignore it or move past it. It's very hard for me to want to support somebody who is willingly inflicted this pain onto others. But ultimately, it's not up to me. It's up to the public, it's up to you, to determine if Armie Hammer will end up like Mark Wahlberg or if he'll end up like Kevin Spacey, who is actually still getting work. Except the work he's getting is weird, independent films where he plays serial killers. And because I don't want to end this video on a completely depressing note, and I need to take my mind off of everything I've just said, let's look at the trailer really quickly.
I'm actually in the market for a house of my own in the region here. You want something?
Just you.
It's moments like that that really make you question if Kevin Spacey was ever a good actor, or if we were just all collectively wrong. But for Armie Hammer's personal journey and his personal career, a lot of it will come down to if audiences respond to his tongue-in-cheek cannibal references on his stupid podcast. The tagline of HammerTime is, "Don't worry, we fed him," which is so ridiculous I am struggling to even write a joke to say about it. It's totally normal to downplay our own insecurities. It's a little weirder when those insecurities are tied to us allegedly being a cannibal. But in any event, the HammerTime podcast was completely terrible. I don't have any interest in continuing to listen to Armie Hammer make excuses, try to win back public support in the form of an hour-long podcast riddled with technical issues. When he's making family-friendly action movies or is one of the main characters in a Star Wars prequel, then maybe we'll talk. But that's going to do it for me, guys. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you've enjoyed it, please like and comment on this video. It really helps get this video out to more people. And if you like my content, consider subscribing. But let me know your thoughts down below. Remember, I do read every comment, so let me know. Is Armie Hammer, was this a good decision? Did you listen to the podcast? I didn't like it, and I don't really want to keep giving you prompts for the comments because it upsets me and I want to end the video. So that's going to do it for me, guys. As always, my name is Patrick, but my friends call me Pat, and I will see you for the next one.